Good morning, everyone. Thanks. All right. Welcome to the second concurrent session of the TLT Symposium. Today we have the pleasure of hearing from, and I'll just read off this right here, Ann Clements, Casey Fenton, Kate Miffitt, and Chris Stubbs. They're going to tell us about badging. So I'm very excited about that. I hope you are too. Please give them a warm welcome and we'll get on our way.
So good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Chris Stubbs. I'm with Teaching and Learning with Technology, and my role today is basically to mooch off much more talented people than I am. So I'm teeing up two really exciting implementations of digital badges that I hope give you guys something to think about as you're thinking about hopefully your own digital badge implementation. So before we get going, the requisite question is, does everybody know what a digital badge is? We have to start there, because if there's any no's, this doesn't make any sense for very long. So is everybody comfortable with digital badges? It's okay, this is a safe space, so if you're the nervous person that's like, I'm not gonna raise my hand, we're good. Okay, perfect. That means we can move on to the much more interesting stuff, which is why these badges, and when I say these, I mean what Kate and Casey and Ann are working on, are significant. And to understand that, it's important to understand where digital badges are starting to gain traction in educational environments. And so if you're familiar with badges, you know that they're this basic idea about a representation of some skill or ability or a competency that you were able to show off, share with other people, that is supported by evidence that's evaluated by someone else. That idea is really starting to blow up, not necessarily by the name digital badges, but in the field of competency-based education. Has everyone heard of that before? Is everyone familiar with the general concept? Okay. So we're seeing this start to play out in different universities in different spaces, some of which are existing, like University of Wisconsin has an option called the Flex Plan that is much more competency-based. It's much more about what you know and providing assessment opportunities. We're also seeing it in universities like Western Governors. How many people have heard of Western Gov before? Okay, so about half the people in the room. For those who do not know of Western Governors, it's kind of a unique approach on education. And what Western Gov says is basically, we don't care where you learn it. Our job is to provide the assessment. And the point of this is, by not focusing on sort of where you learn it, you can focus on getting through faster, a cheaper educational experience. And this is happening because people are learning things in all new ways. Like they're learning it from peer groups, they're learning it from internships, they're learning it because they watch tutorials on YouTube, or they just decided to teach themselves. So self-learning is becoming a big thing. Badges can represent that, and that's one of the original reasons for badges, but we're also seeing entire universities take advantage of this sort of space. A little bit more recently, so Southern New Hampshire University, everybody know about Southern New Hampshire? So a big player in the online space, a few less hands go up. They have been very successful in online learning over the past couple of years. They recently launched an initiative called College for America. This is a very similar idea, much more based on core competencies. They've actually, to my understanding, gotten rid of credits entirely. There's no semesters. It's all about just individual competencies that you need to complete. Now there's 120 competencies in a degree, which gets a little sort of close to maybe, well, it sounds a lot like that's a credit, because we have 120 credits, for example, in our degrees. But the focus is really on individual, more tangible pieces of information that people know, skills, abilities, things like that. Again, the advantage is about speed, right? You get through faster. They have something they call the $10,000 degree for an undergraduate, which is a big deal. So this is where we've seen the sort of concept of badges kind of emerge at a higher level. They don't call them badges, but it's really about focusing on individual pieces of information that can be assessed. They're more granular, they're more transparent to people. There aren't a lot of necessarily tangible outcomes from a course, and badges can represent that, to talk about things like leadership or global perspective. The other key area that I think is going to be covered today is this idea of transparency. And for anyone who has maybe drank a little bit of the Kool-Aid of the MOOC, right, the promise there was always like, you can build this incredible educational experience from the best courses at MIT and Stanford and Harvard, and you could put them all together into this program and it'll be unbelievable, and it sounds pretty good, right? But no one's really figured out the way to combine all these things to make a meaningful academic credit. And that's really what Ann has been trying to work on, is how can we leverage open resources across a group of people, in this case the CIC, and how can we credential the experiences that people are earning in those kinds of degrees, to make it so that if you were to transfer from Penn State to Northwestern, you have something in your possession that gives you sort of gravitas with the faculty across different universities. And that's a really interesting project that I think took a lot of work and a lot of collaboration and cooperation from different people. And so that's really what the crux of today is. So now my job is to get out of the way and let the more interesting people talk. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Casey and Kate to talk about the liberal arts citizen.
Thank you, Chris. And I just have to do a quick computer switch here. Okay, hi everyone. So I'm Kate Miffitt, and my colleague Casey Fenton and I are going to talk today a little bit about this badging pilot that we developed beginning last summer called the Liberal Arts Citizens Badges. So first, I just wanted to introduce kind of where we're situated in the college. I think our unit is fairly unique. So we work within undergraduate and graduate education within the College of the Liberal Arts. Our office is this green one over here on the right. And we work on projects related to digital pedagogy and scholarship that focus on the resident instruction side. So we try to build community with students and faculty around the uses of technology in the classroom. But not strictly, around like developing online courses for World Campus. And within undergraduate and graduate education sit a couple of other units, primarily that, deliver student services. So we have a career enrichment network that helps students in the liberal arts prepare for job searches and look for jobs. We have professional undergraduate advisors. We have the Paterno Fellows Program, which is a pathway to get into the Honors College, and then just kind of your traditional student services. So what we observed is that there were a couple of pain points that some of these units were experiencing. We are very fortunate, I think, across Penn State to be very resource rich, and so we have more internships and scholarships than we can give away sometimes. And so we wanted to start thinking about ways that we could encourage students to take advantage of the opportunities that they have in their undergraduate career. So we began with a few goals. First, as I started to allude to, we wanted to recognize and incentivize student behaviors, particularly around co-curricular activities and community engagement. And again, it's these things that, we sometimes take for granted. They seem like kind of fairly obvious, like you should meet with your academic advisor. Well, the reality is that not all students do, and that the ones that do, like, they should be kind of recognized in some way, and then, be empowered to talk about that experience in a way that translates to show that they have certain skills or values that actually have currency in the workplace. So that kind of moves to the second bullet point, like, what are some of the things that students are doing that align to some of the core liberal arts values, and how do we translate those values to employers as people are beginning their job searches? Finally, we wanted to provide students a vocabulary to talk about these experiences that they have. So again, many students, they might be a student leader, they might have studied abroad, they might just do something as simple as, like, they blogged about Thon on our website. And so sometimes I think it's hard, particularly for liberal arts students who aren't that don't have the most linear career path in front of them, to think about all of the things that they do in their college and outside of the classroom that prepare them to be really productive and valuable employees, and how to kind of translate those experiences. So we want to give them a framework to start to think about some of that. So I'm going to turn it over to Casey to talk a little bit about the actual design plan that we came up with.
Okay, thanks. So as we get into this, what I'm going to do is basically go through some of the badges that we have. So we have 4 badge categories, and then there are badges within those categories. And you can see them all at that website, but we're just going to go through a couple today. And I think the thing to pay attention to is probably, and unfortunately it's kind of washed out up here, but the language. And Kate mentioned vocabulary a couple times, and we've spent a lot of time doing many things with these badges. building websites, building presentations, talking to stakeholders. But I would say the thing that was most important, that we really spent the most time on, was these very short bits of text. Like, it was so critical, because sometimes I put myself in my own shoes when I was in school. I was not somebody that went and met with my advisor. And I used to think, well, why didn't I do that? And it was because I couldn't connect it to anything that I would ever tell an employer or tell anyone was valuable. And I'd think, I could figure it out on my own. But so we started thinking, well, how do we give them a vocabulary to frame these experiences in a way that is valuable to them? So in the case of, this is a global perspective category. That would include things like study abroad, taking advantage of global experiences here on campus, or shorter term global experiences like embedded courses or service learning trips. Yeah?
Sorry to interrupt. I have a student, he just came to study abroad. He's in a liberal arts program. I'm his advisor. Should he apply for a Globalist Badge based on doing a week in London? Right?
Yes, that's kind of the ideal. At the end here, we're going to get into where this all stands in terms of implementation. But yes, that is the kind of thing that we want to incentivize. So with the globalists, we're looking for people who are living abroad. But again, we put it in terms of, I'm not going to read every one to you. I will read this one to you. Living abroad, whether for study or work, enables you to understand and appreciate other cultures and to see your own in a new way. Earn the Globalist Badge by completing a 6-week or longer study or intern abroad program. So again, that vocabulary of thinking about what the abroad experience brings you and how it can be something that, as Kate says, adds currency when you make a transition from college to whatever's next. That's important, and it's one of the things we're working with Jacqueline Dudek right now, and she's kind of going to study this program, and one of the things that I'm really interested to see is, do the students pick up to the vocabulary? Do they start talking about their experience in different ways? And a lot of the evidence is, in this case, it's a blog post, and so we'll really be able to see, are they picking up this language, are they using it? So the next category is initiative. These are the things like meeting with your undergraduate advisor, doing undergraduate research, completing an internship. And the sample badge here is the apprentice. So we're saying learning by doing is a great way to develop knowledge and expertise. Earn the apprentice badge by putting theory into practice in an internship or undergraduate research experience. So that would be an example of the initiative badges. Leadership. The self-aware leader, so this is basically completing StrengthsFinder. And the other thing is, the vocabulary is important, also going back to what Kate showed you in terms of the offices that sit in undergraduate education. Each of these badges is kind of targeting a need that those different offices have identified. So in this case, it's the Career Enrichment Network, who have had for some time leadership assessment programs, and they'd like to attract more students to it. They're now using StrengthsFinder, and so the self-aware leader badge is to incentivize students to do that. And then engagement. This is really about, we want, Chris Long, who's in the room, often talks about the liberal arts as being something that you need to put into practice. And so we, for a long time, have had efforts to create community in the liberal arts through blogging, through social media, but we never really had a way to reward participation in that. So we want students to be participating actively in the community. In this case, the badge is the storyteller badge. It's an example, and it's great storytelling allows you to bring people together and motivate them to act. So you want to practice that, and this is a badge to incentivize you to do that. And I believe, okay, so I will just leave it at this slide. So those are all, each of those categories, global perspective, initiative, engagement, and leadership. If you earn one from each and then 2 more from any, we give you the big one, which is the Liberal Arts Citizens Badge. And at that, I'm going to turn it back to Kate.
Is this available for the campuses too?
So we could talk a little bit about that when we kind of get into credentialing. So the way that the platform is set up, that there are two models. Like, so students can submit to earn badges, and then the badges can also be cloned. So my recommendation, because the types of evidence and the credentialers for these badges are very college specific, that any campus that we're interested in, we'd be happy to talk to you about potentially cloning them and then kind of setting up your own system and aligning it with your own units and things that would make sense there. Because I think while the values are very transferable, the particular flow of this is, yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our design approach. Given that digital badges are fairly new, there's not a whole lot of literature out there about it, but we really kind of took a practitioner perspective from it, and we want it to be really collaborative. So we just kind of started by meeting with these different units that I mentioned, like the Career Enrichment Network and the advisors, and talked a little bit about what are some of their pain points, what would kind of their model student look like, what would be some things that they would want to recognize. And so we kind of began just by talking to other people about what their challenges were. And then we talked about this kind of the values framework. Casey had done a lot of pre-work to this. We also have a college blog called the Liberal Arts Voices at voices.la.psu.edu. And he had kind of done a lot of work thinking about the categories and encouraging students, rather than just to talk about their personal experience, like mapping that personal experience to a liberal arts value. So we had a bit of a framework in place and thinking about the types of values we wanted to incorporate. Also being mindful not to include things that really are more under the domain of the academic side. So things like communication skills, while one would argue that's certainly a liberal arts value, it's not one that we're positioned to credential. So we wanted to be mindful of what we could certify and what really is best left to the academic departments. Finally, it was thinking about really strategically, what are we asking students to do to submit for evidence that's meaningful for them, so that it would demonstrate some meaningful learning experience, but that also wouldn't be really time consuming for our already busy staff to kind of sign off on. So most of the evidence for these badges are short reflective blog posts that go up on our blog, and it kind of serves to build community for students, asks them to reflect on their experiences, and it's an easy kind of, they submit a link, somebody can look at it, kind of scan it fairly quickly without being super labor intensive. So that was those were our main criteria when we were kind of going into this. Just to talk a little bit about where we are currently piloting a subset of the badges with a small group of student leaders in the college. We targeted them because they're our high achieving students, so they've done a lot of the experiences that would earn badges, and so they can just kind of submit evidence and kind of be off and running. From that, we're going to think this summer a bit about, as we scale this up, what sort of training and calibration needs to take place among our credentialers. And finally, we, as Casey mentioned, we're really excited to have partnered with Jacqueline Dudek, who's a PhD student in the College of Ed. And she is going to help us collect some quantitative and qualitative data about the efficacy of this pilot and things that we might do to improve. We both kind of just wanted to talk about some quick takeaways, but I want to be mindful and hand it over to Anne so she has some time. So I'll just put this out here as seeds for questions at the end. But as Casey mentioned, we really paid a lot of attention to language and the design and presentation to really make this compelling to students. We also both happen to have been English majors in undergrad, so fighting over word choice was a big part of the process. We learned as we were putting these into the Penn State badging platform, which is really matured and is ready for use. We kind of did all of our design work first, and then we're putting it into the platform. So there's kind of a little disconnect at this point. Some of the language and things we had come up with don't quite neatly fit in there. So do you design for the tool, or do you design for your goals and then kind of make the best use of the tool? Is kind of what we're struggling with right now. I think an interesting question for the whole community is how do you make use of existing badges versus kind of creating new ones? What are the things that are novel versus the things that, feasibly everyone in this room might have some vision of a leadership badge. So how do we kind of best borrow or partner from each other's ideas and things without kind of cluttering the system. And where does the meaning in the badge itself come from? Is it in the token? Is it in, adding it to a resume? Or as in our, hypothesis, it's really about, seeding students with something to talk about in a meaningful way. So it's not the badge itself that carries the value, but it's the having earned and kind of been empowered with this sort of vocabulary to talk about it that becomes the meaningful part of it. So we're happy to, talk further at the end, but I want to make sure Anne has some time to talk about her pilot, so I'm going to turn it over to Anne. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Anne Clements, and I'm faculty in the School of Music, and I'm going to share a project that we're just piloting right now. It's called the Collaborative Music Education Series. I teach at the undergraduate level, primarily in teacher training. I train people who want to become K-12 music teachers. And I reached this point, I've been at Penn State for 12 years, and I teach the same class every year, Intro to Music Ed. And I thought, gosh, well, I have got some expertise in curriculum and in assessment and repertoire selection. Janet Barrett over at Illinois, she really talks about integrative arts in a unique way, and I wish my students could have an experience with her. Or I think about Maud Hickey, who's at Northwestern University, who's amazing at creativity. Boy, I wish my students could have that experience. And with Skype and the ability to have Google Hangouts, we can bring in these scholars from different places, but it can be kind of frustrating because you get a great short experience and then poof, they're gone, right? And then the funding to try to keep something like that going longitudinally becomes quite complicated. So I had this idea. We're probably all teaching Intro to Music Ed at every institution that's offering a music education degree program. Why are we doing this in isolation? Why aren't we helping each other, and what can technology do to help us build not only those engagements, but a longitudinally sound way of responding and corresponding with each other? And so Penn State is part of the Big Ten, and we have an academic unit to that, which is the Committee for Institutional Collaboration. There are 15 schools in the Big Ten. It's a math equation for you right there. Figure that out. 13 of which have music education degrees at the undergraduate level. So I approached my colleagues in the Big Ten and I said, are you interested in exploring how we can share? And they all said yes. And so I thought, here's our concept. Let's partner with music ed faculty from across the CIC to create a series of collaborative learning modules that leverage the specific expertise found at each of those institutions. And this was sponsored by a COIL grant, so we had some money to begin with. So there were 3 levels of collaboration. The first level was to contribute content, share that expertise. And this came about through the creation of 7-minute-long TED-like talks. And I went around with a colleague around the Big Ten and recorded all of these TED Talks. Then we constructed curriculum around each of those video modules, including discussion questions, activities that are kind of like homework assignments, resources for students, and then we even built some assessments so that faculty who use the system could do pop quizzes really easily and those kinds of things. And then we simply encouraged faculty who had participated in this project to use it at their institution. So what we came up with in this series is not a course. It's not credit-bearing at any institution. It's simply an open educational resource, but it was strategically built around the CIC to help our students. So we had over 30 faculty willing to participate in this, the 13 schools in the CIC, and we built over 40 video modules. And here on this side, we've got kind of a still screen sample. You get to a video module and a menu pops up. It's built on a social platform of threaded comments we thought would be interesting because students then could write a question about the video they were watching, and that faculty member at Northwestern could respond, or students at Illinois could get into the conversation and engage with each other. There are those larger activities that require students to create something and then post their evidence to the series, and then the listing of the resources. Well, how do you motivate faculty and students to really want to get engaged in this when there is no credit-bearing aspect? And that's where we came to digital badges, which is kind of a very different way than the two of you set out deliberately. We were looking for that piece. You know, how do we give credit when there's no credit associated with it? And so we decided to badge based on what we thought would be an attractive outcome for students. And that was the brand new National Core Art Standards in Music Education. So the criteria for our badges was a pre-existing source. It's these standards that are going to be K-12 teachers need to be familiar with. And so those are creating, performing, responding, and connecting. Every video module has one activity that is badgeable in one of those 4 areas. And in order to earn, say, the creating badge, you need to complete 2 badgeable activities that are listed as creating, and then you compare that with the national standard for creating, and you submit your evidence. So if you earn all 4 badges in these 4 national standards categories, you can get an Uber or a Meta badge in the National Core Art Standards. And this is something the students can take with them. They can export it. This is all housed on the Penn State badging app system, but they can send it out to Mozilla or wherever, their e-portfolios, and they can show potential employers that they've had these experiences. So again, when you're in the module, and I think you all got a sheet that can take you to the website. When you're in the module, you'll see that they're all designated. You can see examples of what kinds of activities are badgeable for each of these small sections. A unique aspect of this was trying to figure out how to assess when we've got 14 possible examples of evidence. So everything in our system is badgeable with one of these 2 matrix, these rubrics. And it's a written activity evaluation because many of the activities we're doing are based on student writing. And then we also have a musical performance evaluation because some of these require students to improvise and upload their YouTube link for other students to see. So again, very easy to do. And because it's housed within the CIC, I'm not even having to review these. I've recruited graduate students from all over the Big Ten who are interested in assessment to help me evaluate student work. And with these simple rubrics, it's really easy to do. So I encourage you to take a look at musicedseries.org. It is open right now. You can see everything except the student engagement, which because it's student work, we've closed that off. But if you're interested and you have a Penn State account, you can actually sign on and take a look and see what the students are doing. But thank you so much. Yeah, I think at this point we're happy to take any questions you might have on badging. Or ideas. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So the liberal arts program, is it up and running?
So as Kate mentioned, right now we are piloting it with our liberal arts undergraduate council, so our student leadership. And the reason for that is partly because of where the platform stands at the moment. It's a little bit quirky, and they're a small group that's willing to work through that.
And it's on the Penn State badging system?
It is on the Penn State badging system,
So
yeah.
what's quirky about it? Is it something on the badging system?
So this is kind of the second iteration of the badging platform that everybody's been playing with right now, and so it's been under development for a couple of months, and I think we're getting very close to sort of the open release launch when we're just ready to take it out. But there are a couple of, I guess, it's kind of a beta, is the way that we're viewing it right now. So people are still sort of finding bugs and idiosyncrasies in it that are being developed. But our sister organization, TLT Studio, has been very active in development of the platform, and so we should be seeing a more public announcement about release information sometime in the near future. So that also goes to anyone who is interested in making their own badges. The person I would recommend pointing you to is Megan Kohler. So she is handling the sort of pedagogical consultations for the badging platform. So she can sit down with you, talk about what it is that you might need to do, what you need to proceed, how to maybe construct evidence if that's not something you're familiar with. So yes, so that's a good, I guess, handoff for anyone who's interested.
Right. So can I ask a couple questions? So Chris knows me, so maybe you can anticipate some of the questions. You've got a Yammer group for digital badges, and I follow along in it, but it's not really for faculty. Is there a place where faculty can go to just sort of get support and help and ideas and, about badging?
Yeah, so that's actually something that's coming as well. And so Megan's involvement in the process was to help facilitate a lot of that. And so because the platform is relatively immature, it hasn't had the time to develop the support networks that we've seen from other places. And so things like having a site dedicated to frequently asked questions, tutorials, videos on how to get started, support resources, a space like a Yammer group, all of that stuff is going to be coming in the next couple of weeks and months.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So both examples that you guys gave are within a college or an entity. Do you know of examples where you see this kind of system that happens interdisciplinary? In terms of, who would, obviously there needs to be somebody who is able to recognize and provide that badge, but I can just think of a lot of amazing interdisciplinary ideas connected to this, but how would that work?
So I don't have a thought on an example for you, but I think what, in the way that Kate mentioned that with our badges, the real value is in how it helps a student contextualize their experience, the vocabulary, as we've been saying, that we want them to pick up. I mean, it does matter that the College of the Liberal Arts is credentialing them as a leader, and potentially, I always think of this like in terms of a resume. Depending on a job I'm applying for, I might list 3 jobs back, I might list 4 jobs back. It just, I'm going to put something out there that's relevant. And if there's a chance to put a badge out there that's relevant, and there's that real Penn State College of the Liberal Arts name behind it, then that's there. But like I said, I think that more likely what's going to happen with ours is it's just going to help students talk about their experiences differently. And in that case, it could be a student group creating badges that helps them do that, or it could be any group that doesn't have to be that entity or that name putting weight behind the credential. It's just a group that's putting something out there that gives students a challenge to try to achieve, and then they know how to talk about it differently.
So just another example, I guess, is something like entrepreneurship, right, which we thought, okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. When we had first talked with a couple of folks in different departments about that, one of the difficult things is sort of the politics of it. So we've actually, the newest version of the system allows you to sort of divvy up tasks. So as you create the steps in the badge, you can say, okay, well, I'm going to send this to the expert over here in engineering. I'm going to send this step to the expert over here in a foreign language, for example. So you could very easily, technically, create those kinds of multidisciplinary experiences. The difficulty is in finding the relationships where people are comfortable saying, like, well, we are going to own entrepreneurship, for example, because that also makes something of an exclusionary system, right? So if the entrepreneurship badge gets created, anyone else who has ties to that might step forward and say, well, hey, I do entrepreneurship stuff. But if you have a multidisciplinary example, I think the system can certainly handle it. So we could certainly talk more.
So as proponents of badging, what would you say are the limitations of badges, or what would you say badges can't do? Just in your opinion, as somebody who works closely with them and has an understanding of them firsthand.
As an instructional designer, I think it's all about the design. So I think it could have applications on a lot of different levels, whether it's within courses at a course level or at the program level. But really, it's about thinking intentionally about all the variables that the meaningfulness to students, the feasibility of implementation, the opportunities for feedback, and adding value by the credentialer so. It's less that I think there's a use case that I would say, oh no, that would never work, and more like, are you doing this just as like a check mark? Like, is this a check plus for something, or does this actually add value to an experience? So that would be my kind of designer answer to that question.
Yeah, so I came to this originally from kind of the technology perspective. That's my role, specifically sort of the educational gaming piece, right, where we've seen things like badges and achievements exist for a long time. I think in those cases, badges are viewed from a very motivational perspective. There's also some social gravitas that goes with that, but I think that always assuming that a badge will be motivational unless you've done what everybody else on this panel has talked about and find ways to make that meaningful, kind of what Kate was just saying. I think just assuming that giving this token to someone is going to be very impactful to them in and of itself can be a mistake. So I would agree with Kate that it's not necessarily the use case, but just assuming that people will like fall all over themselves to earn badges because they're badges may not be accurate.
So I was part of the general education task force, but, or part of the feedback on it, and one of the suggestions was to have general education requirements that were things like global citizens, so that to build the badge concept into a higher level requirement for the college. And I don't know whether that's going to come to fruition or not, but even if it does not, my thought, and I expressed this within my faculty, and I think it's important, is that one interdisciplinary way that we can do, or that we can make use of badges is as a, I don't want to say extra credit, a partial credit or partial requirement within courses. So if you're teaching a liberal arts course that requires leadership or performance skills or whatever it is, and you say, I will give students this many points for doing this task that I set before you, but I'll give you this many more points if you get a credential in it. That makes the credential meaningful within, and not a token credential, it's a real credential, but within the course, within the expectations of the teacher or a set of teachers as you've done for music. So, it doesn't become an empty, kind of sticker, let's say. It becomes a real pedagogical goal that is taken up by both the faculty and the students. And my question is, how do, let's say, non-PSU students, high schoolers, students from other places, Southern New Hampshire University students, God forbid, who want to get these Penn State credentials, come to Penn State to get these credentials? Is it open yet, or is it?
So I can say that is something that is being explored at a very high level in sort of some of the MOOC spaces, because currently it's sort of like that, right? Like you get the certificate of participation if you do above a certain level, but nothing more granular than that. But in terms of the credit potential for that, we're in sort of very early conversations with groups like the Registrar's Office about what that means, right? If you were to earn, say, a badge from one of Ann's courses, how does that have any bearing on a credit course? Does that make it a little easier? Does it knock a little bit of time off? We don't know the answer to that yet. So I think it's a very interesting question that we don't have an answer to at this point.
Because, short of saying every student at Penn State is required to be a global citizen, because we only turn out global citizens, and then, the localized person says, I don't want that. I don't like requirements, So, you can say, well, it's not a requirement, but it's like an A, which is also just a sticker on a performance in a course,
Just kind of one cautionary tale, I guess, in terms of the grade thing. I don't necessarily have an opinion whether good or bad idea. I think it can be certainly very helpful in courses. But because people may want to share the badges, it can just get into privacy issues. So if you're sort of forcing students to do it, then the questions of, well, how easy is it for us to share that information? And we have sort of taken the tact of making everything private by default, but if that should ever change, that could get into sort of gray areas there.
So the student earns the badge, the student has the right to share or not share the badge.
Right, they make that decision. So, yeah.
I respectfully withdraw the suggestion.
No, it's
should require this. No.
it's not a bad idea at all, but.
But if the credentialing is seen as a legitimate form of extra course or extracurricular credentialing, if those rubrics and stuff make sense for some parts of the arts, then it makes sense for many parts.
I know there's a question in the back.
I have a question for Ann. So I think what you did here is very powerful because it involved multiple institutions, and how many of the institutions participated really shocked me in a good way. So what were some of the barriers and fears and risks that you had to talk about with able to get such collaboration across the CIC?
That's a really interesting question, Heather. The biggest fears and issues came from technology people at other institutions. Is this a MOOC? What is this? They didn't know what this was. Proprietary, ownership of knowledge is a big issue. Is Penn State giving these certifications, but my student's not going to Penn State? And there was a lot of clarification that had to happen, and it wasn't with faculty. I was amazed. Faculty were like, I totally want to do this. How do we do this? It was their technology staff that really was trying to figure out how to do it. Communication was the key to that. We also found a model instead of, it's kind of MOOC-like, but it's closed and small and all these other issues. So we used a distributed, open, collaborative course model, which has one other use in a feminism class, but at least gave us a legitimate structure that we could say, look, other universities are coming together to collaborate in this way. So just finding that model and then selling it. Does that answer your question, Heather? Yeah, thank you.
I think we are out of time, so thank you, everyone. Yep.